Greetings, productive programmers. So in this module, I'm going to teach you how to communicate your successes effectively. That way you can increase your financial income. And the way that we do that is we document our successes, quantify our successes, communicate our successes, and ultimately we will profit from our successes. Now, the way that this works, it's really easy. The documenting your successes phase is actually already taken care of for you. Because we have our productivity system, we are already tracking and documenting a lot of our successes, and they will naturally bubble their way up to the done section. So what this has done for you is it's created an inventory of all of the things you've done at your workplace that you can use now as collateral to increase your income by using them when you bring them to your annual review. And so the way that we can benefit from these is we can locate the ones that we can actually find the most value that we brought for the company, and we can put them in a success grouping. So we can put them in either a success grouping like this, or you can create a note, or simply you could have a combination where you have a note of your successes here, and you could also pack in a few of the items that are successes. That these are going to be the ones that have really brought in a huge amount of value for the company. So you just really need to have a list that you can put a bunch of your successes. So success 1, where you added a new feature, and this maybe brought in a lot of new income for the company. But the second piece of really knowing which ones of these that you want to include as your successes, that you want to document as your successes, is really understanding how to quantify what you've done for the workplace. So I want to give you 3 real-life examples of quantifying your successes that I've done in my own personal life. And I want to show you these examples because these I've brought to annual reviews that I've been to, and I've used them to actually increase my salary. And the way that I've done this, and these are just 3 examples, there was a lot more that I've used before, but these are 3 nice examples that help communicate the concept of quantifying your successes. In the first one, there was a company that I worked for that had quite a number of contractors that essentially had service areas. And they would have the rights to a service area that they would work within. And so there was actually a team that would, or some employees that would draw these out by hand. And what I did to quantify what I ended up building, first of all, is I built a system to replace their need to draw it by hand. Because it was it was too much to do, basically. There was too much work coming in, and it was taking forever. They were having to draw these all by hand. And so what I did is I automated the process of creating a digital map of every service area. And it's trickier than you think because there's a lot of edges and corners, and some of the service areas are kind of very tricky. And so it would take them a long time to draw them by hands, up to 15 or 20 minutes. And so if you were able to do the math of 15 to 20 minutes, and they were doing about 20 per day, and you take a look at the average salary that the employee was making, around $75,000, I was able to estimate that there was a $9,000 a year annual saving for the company for every single year for the rest of the company's lifetime. And so it made it very easy to document and quantify that. So basically what I did, again, is I was able to take the number of minutes necessary to complete the task, multiply that by how many times the task was being done, and then multiply that by the salary that the employee who was performing it was basically getting paid on an annual basis. And I was able to figure out how much of their salary was being put into essentially this process alone. And so by automating the process, I essentially created a system that generated $9,000 of value for every single year for the rest of their life, potentially more because it will be processing more than that employee could do on their own. So this automation process, it was able to be quantified, and I was able to communicate that in an annual review, and it helped contribute towards securing that raise that I got that year. Another example was a $59,000 a year bug. So we basically had a lot of landing pages for our clients for a company that I was working for. And I was able to basically come up with a dollar amount on how much each landing page on average for the site would generate over its annual year. And what I did is I found a bug that was it was not generating as many landing pages as it was supposed to. And so because each landing page was set up basically on a town in a city. So it was very for your city, and it would have the name of your city. So I was able to fix that. And when I did that, I was able to come up with 900 new landing pages. And by applying the average amount that each landing page was currently earning to that 900 new access points that were coming into the funnel, the sales funnel, I was able to show that there was basically a $59,000 a year saving that was perpetual for the lifetime of the company. And so this made it very easy to secure over a $20,000 raise that year, no problem. And then finally, a third example was switch in development environments. So there was a team that I was working with, and it would take a long time to switch between the development features and test out the application. And so what I did is it would take maybe 5 minutes of the developer going through and changing settings to set up their environment when they were switching from one environment to a next and spinning up the servers. So what I did is I created an automated process for this that was basically at the snap of a finger. And this allowed the developers to basically save 5 minutes for each developer. But when you multiply that by 15 developers and you multiply it for every single day, multiple times a day, it came out to be a very large number when you multiply it by salaries, the average salary that every one of those developers was making. And although it was a fairly conservative estimate and it was kind of hard to judge for how many times somebody's switching a day, by communicating that to my employer, they were able to see that I was saving a significant amount of time and money for the productivity of the programming team. And so they were able to recognize that since the productivity was increased significantly and was running more efficiently, and developers were happier because they could just click and go and keep their flow going, that this was a highly valued and welcomed feature that was included for the team's tools. And this helped also negotiate for the raise that I was going for that year. So when you are able to quantify anything, when it comes down to dollar amounts, time, number of people, or number of times something has to be done, if you're able to do that, especially when you can put it into dollar amounts, basically companies, then business people that don't know the technical side of stuff, having it in a dollar amount that you can quantify is hugely powerful. And a lot of developers really don't know how to do this. So if you're able to do this and communicate this to your employer, they are really going to appreciate this. And it's going to be no problem when you ask for a really large raise. In the case of the $59,000 a year bug, I was able to ask for a very significant raise that was over $25,000, and I was able to get that no problem just because I was able to communicate that that value was already earned by the employer. If you are able to communicate to your employer the value that you're bringing, your employer is going to have no problem giving you a raise. It's a lot of times we feel like the employer doesn't want to give us a raise or a bonus, but the truth is, if you can show that you're creating the value for them and that they're getting some difference in net value out of what you're producing, they're going to have no problem giving you that. The problem is when they're not really sure how much you've done in terms of performance, how your coding translates into dollar amounts. And so when there's that gap, which there typically is between programming and somebody that's in the business side of things that doesn't understand the technical, it can be hard to understand where that value is. So by being able to quantify some of the tasks that you can automate on the job or features that you can implement, bring in more sales, and you can make the decision for your employer to approve that raise very simple. And that causes the next two items on the list to be a pretty easy job for you. So communicating your successes, all you have to do is bring those data and the breakdown of the numbers with you and show how you quantified it. I always recommend that you go with a conservative number. That way there's no chance for them to be able to argue against you. And you can always argue that you believe it is a conservative number, so that might be even more savings, which sounds better than if there's potentially less savings than what you're promoting. And then profiting from your success is just as simple as asking for that raise. So ask for a number amount that's between the amount of value you're able to show at an annual performance versus what you're bringing in. So if collectively you're bringing in $30,000 of numbers that you're able to quantify, go ahead and ask for that $15,000 raise. Don't be shy. And I think that the big problem a lot of employees have is that they're afraid to ask for a raise just because they don't even know what they're worth. So if you know what you're worth and you quantify that and you have it all documented, all of your successes, then you will heavily benefit. And additionally, if you can't quantify something, then everything that you've documented as successes, you should still go through the list because it'll show your employer how much you've done, and they may have forgotten about a few things that you've done. So definitely don't be afraid to go through everything that ends up in your done list and just communicate that to your employer as big wins, especially if there are any that they were really wowed by. Even if you can't quantify them into dollar amounts very effectively, maybe they'll be able to make that connection in their brain. So you definitely still want to run through your big successes, even if they can't be quantified. But quantifying them is just that extra bonus that really gives you that boost and solidifies their decision to approve that raise. And ultimately, if there was some reason that your employer didn't give you a raise, this gives you a huge bonus as well if you decide to do a job change. Because when you make your job change, all you have to do is take all your documented successes, your quantified successes, and be able to show that to a new employer by saying, this is how much money, this is how much time, this is how much I increased the process's efficiency, and this is how much I've helped the programming team's productivity. Then the new job that you're going to is going to be much more inclined to take you over a new employee. It makes you a much stronger interview candidate when you can communicate your successes. Because again, this is how businesses understand things. They understand it in dollar amounts. They don't necessarily care or understand if you say you know JavaScript or you know Python or vice versa, some other technical detail. They'll be more inclined to hire you, especially get you through the HR phases when they can see that you've saved 20,000, 50,000, that you've increased the efficiency by 20 minutes per day for every single employee in a company. These things are big, and that's going to mean a lot more to somebody that you're interviewing for, just as much as it means to your current employer. So that is it for this lesson. Definitely quantify all of your successes that you can, and make sure you take everything that you document to your annual reviews. And by having this information, it's going to be very difficult for you not to secure a very strong, successful raise. Definitely don't be afraid to also cross-reference how much is being paid in your industry. And if you're being paid less than what the averages of your industry, then definitely ask for the average, if not more, because I've definitely seen that as well, where sometimes employees undervalue themselves. Do not undervalue yourself. And I hope that this system helps you understand how much value you have, and also will easily communicate to your employer how much value you bring to the table. So that's it for this lesson. I hope that you found this really helpful so that you can understand how to basically take everything that you've been doing so far and quantify it, so that way you can communicate all of your accomplishments and actually get credited for them. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you over in the next one.